Welcome, welcome. My name is Jason, and this is ARTV, and I'm here with Kendra Cunov. Kendra, it's so beautiful to have you on the show. Uh, you are one of the original, what I consider like the founding community of authentic relating from way back when.
Way back when. It's great to, yeah, it's really great to be here and see you as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, we were doing these courses back in like 2014, 2015 in Boulder. And I remember you coming in for a particular course as a guest course leader. And back then I was an ACL or assistant course leader. And we were able to lead a small group together for an hour and a half. And I just got to drop in with you and feel your style and feel your presence and how you led. And I learned a lot from you back then.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah, thanks for holding all that you have. And could you just give us like the 2-minute version of who you are and like where you've come to now since those early days of authentic relating?
Well, what popped up when we were talking earlier and you said, you want to bring people kind of up to speed, is I thought, oh, there's a way that I don't sort of explicitly talk or teach what we might consider authentic relating or circling or like pure forms of these, hardly ever.
Mhm.
But I was like, oh, it's kind of like I was raised Buddhist. And and like people say, are you a Buddhist? And I'm like, I think so. I feel like there's something very foundational for me that comes in where some of those values or stances are just like, oh, that's part of the foundation of how I
Mhm.
view the world or how I teach or what I think is important. And I think, Decker and Brian started the Authentic Man program in like 2003 or 4 or something. So it's like, oh, I mean, it's a little
Wow.
weird now to be able to say things like 20 years ago, and I'm like, I can't be that old. But we were just babies at the time. And there was a way that I kind of just got dropped into it. Like it wasn't a plan I had for my life,
Mhm.
but that foundation, um, starting there and then really with the authentic relating games nights, and like regularly Decker and I held those consistently for a long time in our house. um, I think of that as really foundational to just
Yeah.
how I view relationship.
Mhm.
And so if I was going to do like the really fast forwarded version, there's a way without getting kind of too abstract and cosmic that for me where I am now is it's almost like actually I weave that kind of the Buddhism and the authentic relating together. And that the way that I hold my perspective and my teachings is that everything is relationship.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and that's the most interesting and empowering place and alive, I think, like interesting, alive, and empowering place to move moment to moment, day to day, interaction to interaction in my life.
Hmm. Yeah, beautiful. When I was writing the book last year, I was reflecting a lot on some of those early teachings that I received, in 2013, 2014, 2015, when I was really studying with Decker deeply. And I attempted to translate them into really accessible ways. And one of the things I came to is like celebrating the uniqueness of each person. It's like,
Mm,
it's a whole it creates something that's really important for community building. And authentic relating game nights, as they were in San Francisco, was one kind of version. And
mhm,
then what Sarah Ness, took that and did is like this really powerful community building practice
mhm,
that has spread all over the world. And but one of the cornerstones that I was finding is like we're all different, we're all
mm,
so unique. And actually, um, tuning our awareness to the uniqueness and of what someone is contributing to community is
mhm,
just so powerful. It almost like I'm actually looking at the colors behind you, and it like
mm.
this thousand petaled lotus, right? Um, when we really celebrate someone for who they are and what they bring, it just really helps them unfold.
Yeah, well, and what comes up when you say that is that the first layer is first just the willingness to actually see that
Mhm.
we're different. And there's such a human tendency. Again, I think some of this is biological, or it is for belonging. And so we seek for, how are we the same?
Mhm.
If I can find the place we're the same, I feel safer.
Mhm.
And then there is, at least I would say, like a strand in authentic relating, or like these strands that weave through, that encourage in some way, like actually seek what's different,
Mhm.
um, for its own sake. And because that actually allows me to see you
Mhm.
rather than like you through me.
Yeah, really interesting. And one of the reasons I wanted to kind of plant this seed in our dialogue is because you have a course called Relationship by Design, and
Mm.
seeing you put this course out there is what had me reach out to you a couple weeks ago. And this is just like a really interesting um, principle, or what would you call it? What is Relationship by Design?
Yeah, I think it's great. Like, as you started talking, I thought, yeah, what is that? Because it's distinct from, I get to say how everything goes, right? Like, it's not like relationship by control, or and it requires this piece that you're talking about, which is being like welcoming and being witness to not only the unique arising of each individual, but recognizing that that changes over time, that who I am
Mhm.
changes over time, and whoever I'm relating with changes over time.
Mhm.
And so the way that I hold the program itself as having four fundamental pillars,
Mhm.
which is authenticity, which I think is sort of can get very abstract. It's sort of like an overused and underpracticed idea. But authenticity, desire, curiosity, and generosity.
Mhm.
And those are like the overarching pillars or themes. And then how do they play out in any given dynamic between two or more people? And the way that I then work with those, or just that I think that the starting point for anyone who's seeking or like on a path of what is it to create and live relationship by design, is ultimately that it starts with ourselves, right? Like, am I authentic with my own self?
Yeah.
Do I even know what I want? Am I curious about who I am? Like, am I willing to be curious and actually be with the unique arising of who I am moment to moment? And then how generous actually am I with myself? And to take these into real inquiries, so that we even have that available to bring into other relationships with other humans or other beings.
Mhm. Yeah, beautiful. And Relationship by Design, I think of it as like a really amazing process for um, creating foundation. But even more than that, it's like recreating foundation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you have a relationship that's going along and it has a momentum and it has a track that it seems to fall into, like whenever there's tension in the relationship, we fall into this particular groove and pattern. Like a
Mm-hmm.
way to reform or recreate the context of how we're relating is this whole process. And we've used that in some of the courses that I've been a part of. And um, I think you might have designed it with Michael Porcelli originally, like that, those
Mm-hmm.
lists of sentence stems. And it always kind of lived in the back of my head, at least for the last 5 years, as I've been teaching authentic relating, as like a really interesting principle of um, empowerment. So if I don't like the game that's being played in this relationship, what I can do is initiate a process of recreating the context. That's what I think of as relationship by design.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because even inside that, like when you talk about the original process, or exercise, if you will, something like this, and then like the original sentence stems that go with it, like inquiries and ways of sharing and reflecting ourselves to each other, and inviting those reflections, is that they both bring in that curiosity of self and curiosity of other,
Mhm.
and and this is one of the things I talk about a lot, but it also, it requires that we, what I call getting right with reality. And then in kind of authentic relating circling terms, we would call it also like shared reality. Like first I have to say, it, like you said, if I don't like the game that's being played, first of all, I have to acknowledge, well, what is the game I think is being played? Rather than just something not good, you know, meh. It's like, oh, what I don't like is, and it, you know, what we often will find is what I like is, and what I don't like is, right? Rather than globally, like, I just don't like the game. There are these parts of it, right? I don't like we only have sex at night, or I don't like when we have conflict, you leave, or I don't like, right? These are the things, like, I don't like this. And then there's a process basically of going to the person, and this is the shared reality. And it's like, hey, it seems like every time we have a fight, you leave. Does it seem like that to you also, right? Before we go like, why do you always leave when we fight? You know, or like something needs to change about how we fight. It's like, hey, can we even see if we see it the same way?
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about with like the ability that, oh, we can recreate at any time, you know, but it actually requires this kind of inquiry and nuance and willingness to see what is actually so.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So yeah, is your course specifically geared towards romantic relationship? Because, oh, okay.
Yeah. And actually that was really on purpose. It's why I love it. So, you know, I took a few years there where a lot of the work that I did was specifically around romantic relationships. And a big part of the reason that I created Relationship by Design is because I really wanted to work with people like in the multiplicity of all of our relationships.
Beautiful.
And honestly, it's a point of frustration, I think, for me. I think people get very like hyper focused on making sure like this one, you know, lifetime commitment or romantic or sexual partnership, like this has to be the big, you know, point of focus. And I think that puts too much pressure on those relationships at the detriment of our other relationships also.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, authentic relating has always been good at like, well, this is a tool and it applies to your colleague relationships, your friendships, your romantic relationship. It's like a general relationship tool. And I think this process is that too. Actually, I remember doing this, the full set of sentence stems and an exercise with Robert McNaughton at a restaurant. Like we went, like, because I had been working with him for a couple of years and we had like a previous connection. We were both working for Ken Wilber for a couple of years, and it was really beautiful. I remember one of this particular sentence stems that always struck me is like, the thing I can trust you for is, and the thing I can't trust you for is, right? And so it's the way that I think about it is like, just saying I trust you, I don't trust you is really unhelpful. It's like saying I don't trust you is almost like this relationship is in trouble. It's like, you know, or like the very foundation or fabric of our relationship is not good and you need to fix it, right? But I can trust you for this because you're this type of human being, and I can't trust you for this other thing. And maybe you want to work on that, maybe not.
Yeah.
But that's who you are. And let me give you that feedback in a way that you can actually incorporate it.
Yeah. Well, and it's so beautiful because it does, even just like, I can't trust you in business is sort of like very big, if you know, rather than like, you know, I can trust you to be on time, like for in-person meetings, but I can't trust you to get documents to me by the time you say you will, right? These are the kind of things like, oh yeah. And those are the kind of things where, again, if we were actually doing this, we'd be like, yeah, actually that totally aligns with my experience of myself as well. And then it's kind of a relief, right? We're like, oh yeah, that's just what's so. And then, yeah, is there something we want to do about it? Is it just helpful? Like, are you just like, oh, I just need to know that you know that about yourself? Like, actually, what's sort of scary or anxiety provoking is that I think you don't know that. And as soon as I know you know it, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, now we can work with this. And then I love because what'll pop up for different people is different, which yes, it really does have something to do with the other person, right? What I can trust you for does have something to do with you, but it also points to me and maybe what I need or what I value. Because the truth is, maybe you don't show up on time. Like, you probably do, but I'm just using that as a basic example, but that's like a thing, right? Or you're chronically late. And someone else could do that process with you and it would never come up for them because that's not an area of trust or mistrust for them.
Mhm.
So even though it's objectively like true about you, they would bring up some whole other thing and I'd be like, I can't trust you to be on time because that. And so again, it actually points to something for you and something for me at
Beautiful.
the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is the mystery of relationship. You said this thing earlier of like everything is relationship, right? And the mystery is kind of like, it's this profound mirror. In everything that I think about you says something about me. Everything I perceive in you, like we have this concept of projection, which I think is kind of oversimplified. Uh, but like my very perception in seeing you is like my own personality as well. My own karma, my own history is in everything that I'm seeing or the things. And it's like I'm creating all of the possibilities and limitations in relationship with you. And you're doing that with me. And it's simultaneous. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Well, and it's beautiful what you're saying because you're just taking it so much more, like so much deeper and more rich than what I think is the standard trope of, whatever you see in another is something is true about you. It's sort of like, well, it's not quite that linear.
Mm-hmm.
I only see what I see in you because of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're just taking it into a much more nuanced place. And I think again, the like where I come to the lens of the idea of relationship by design and what I always hope to instill in people. Like sometimes I'll be like, oh, you can do this forever. And you can see them go like, like I was really hoping we would just be done. Like, can't we just do a thing? And to me, the idea of everything being in relationship is also that idea of that it is alive.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, as soon as we make something static,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit dead.
Yeah.
And so that's not actually where relationality lives.
Mm-hmm.
Relationality, there is some life and some movement, and that's when it actually feels the best.
Yeah.
It's not that we should always be like on our toes and never quite know what our partner is going to do, but that, actually you could surprise me today or delight me or, all these, it just has so much life in it.
Yeah. And it's moment by moment and also like the phases of life because, what's happening in our relationship this year or this month might be very different than before. And so allowing someone to grow and change, I think is so important. And then just having this tool of like making requests and desire and resetting the context is super important. David White talks about this in like really beautiful language. He talks about the conversational nature of reality and how
Yes.
and how people will never ever show up as like you expect them to. And isn't that amazing? Because it really creates it really has life being a dance, right? It's not about creating yourself into some fixed sense of self and projecting yourself into the world and just staying rigid. He has this quote that I say often when I'm teaching. There's no fixed sense of self that can survive a real conversation. Which means if I'm showing up with authenticity and you're showing up with authenticity, that's the real part.
Yeah.
And we're in conversation, we're both changed.
Yeah. And yeah, that idea, like, we don't know where it's going to go. We don't know what we're going to see. We don't know what we're going to think.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, again, what I love about David White and ultimately is like, we can zoom out and it's not just a human to human conversation, but it's that idea that we're actually in conversation with everything.
Yeah.
I'm in conversation with the room I'm in. I'm in conversation with the plants in my garden. I'm in conversation with the ocean. And the quote again is, no fixed sense of self can survive a real conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's true with a real conversation with anything. Like
Yeah.
if I can't go to the beach and not be changed if I actually show up for like the real conversation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So beautiful.
Yeah. I know. I think it's so fun. This is where it's like authentic relating geeks, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And authentic relating is a really big body of knowledge. And there's so many things that we could talk about. But I really wanted to bring you in to talk about this particular topic. And is there anything in your life, like what's the leading edge of your work in the world?
Hmm. Gosh, that's a great question. Well, I want to say one thing and we'll see if it kind of leads me to a more direct response to that inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was, you put out an inquiry recently that was around who do you know that's using authentic relating in long-term relationship?
Mm-hmm.
And I really think of that as any kind of long-term relationship. Um, and I also really think of it in terms of my romantic partnership. And one of the things I thought about that I had the desire to somehow bring into this space is, there was this period of time in the last year where I noticed that I don't even know quite how to say this, but it was like I wasn't really happy.
Hmm.
Not like in my relationship, but I was kind of like, I could feel those like dissatisfaction gremlins, it's not even exactly words, it's just like was there. And this is why I think like it's so important that we are doing our own internal work at the same time we're doing relational work. Is there was a place I was able to kind of zoom out and look at my own self and kind of look at the relationship a little more objectively, or from a wider perspective. And I had this moment where I realized like, oh, it's not that I'm unhappy with him or he's unhappy with me. We're actually both just a little unhappy right now.
Hmm.
And so when we're together, we're still a little unhappy. But actually, I didn't have any complaint about him. And it didn't seem like he actually had any complaint about me. But it was just a rough time. We were in the middle of 2020 and there was, a lot of upheaval and there was a lot, our kids were home all the time. And it was just, I was like, oh. And so I think one of the pieces I think is so valuable inside of this is that, regular recreation, but that being in relationship with what's so, and that none of this is really meant to make us happy all the time. But the more we're in relationship with what's so, the easier it is. Like I was like, oh, that's okay. I can actually be with that. Like I know how to be a little bit unhappy. And it's, I don't want him to be unhappy, but like it's actually okay with me. Like I don't need to fix him either. And the more that we could be with each other that way, actually, the more that we felt okay at a deeper level, right? Like nothing was wrong, that we were like a little unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that that's an important piece to weave into any kind of relational kind of conversation or teaching or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way that I speak about this tool in the book is speaking the moment.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what saying the obvious can do for a relationship. It's like,
Yeah.
it seems like this is happening. Do you
Yeah.
agree? It's like, oh, yeah, we're both a little unhappy in our lives right now. And all of a sudden I feel 10% more acceptance for the situation and actually a lot more acceptance for you. Like I don't need to make my unhappiness about how you're showing up. Like you're struggling and that, as well. And so, and all of a sudden there's teamwork. And just from that one tool of speaking what is so.
Yes. Yeah. It's so true. So true. So I don't know that really answered your question. I mean, I do find, because I realized this year that I've known my partner for 10 years, I was like, oh, I'm in like a really long-term relationship. And it really has gone through a lot of different iterations. And so there, I would just say in my personal life, that definitely feels like leading edge, like, oh, it's a different thing to really be in relationship in that way. And then in the broader sense, like, I think, I mean, actually, honestly, I think that probably the leading edge of my work, again, has to do with me and just how I relate to it. And
Mm,
it's so much of what we talked about today, but about my relationship with my work, which is like, am I willing to let it be what it actually is?
yeah.
And can I name that objectively before going into any kind of change or fix state? And
Mhm.
can I even ask my work itself, almost like it's being like, well, what do you want? Like, how do you think this is going? And
Yeah.
so beyond any specific of like, what is the, the leading edge of like what I'm doing, I really feel like that is, and some of it again comes in longevity. Like if
Mhm.
we look back to Authentic Man program in 2004,
Mhm.
that means that I've been doing some version of this for almost 20 years. Is it
Wow.
more, 30? Isn't that like, wait, no, 20 years. Yeah. I'm like, how long has it been? How
It's
old
like
am I?
it's like 18
Um,
years, yeah.
and and so it does actually require like a kind of patience and a willingness to stay curious and let things evolve. And it's like, oh yeah, if we want to be in relationship with anyone or anything
Mhm.
really for the long haul, I think that's essential.
Yeah, yeah, I've really appreciated the way that I've seen you bring depth and subtlety
Mm.
to the teaching of this work. I definitely track some of your videos that you do. You do these 10 or 20-minute videos occasionally, um, and it's like I absolutely love that. It seems like you've just been living it,
Mm.
and because you're living it deeply, like there are these gems that pop out that you share with others, and my own path is um, really to promote other people's voices, like to find the leaders in this field and interview them, and really be a huge stand for, like, we're in the middle of this human connection movement. There's
Mm.
hundreds of people leading it. It's not one guru at the top who's like has it all figured out. It's like
Mhm.
something very different is happening here.
Mhm.
And then also to synthesize and make it really practical. I mean, that's what I tried to do with my book, is like to take some of these things and like put it into really plain language.
Mm.
And but ultimately it comes back to what you're saying. Emotional intelligence and communication intelligence is something that we can grow in throughout our entire lives.
Totally.
We can
Yeah.
be 90 years old and still learning about these things, because uh, yeah, it's like it. And especially handling conflict and tension in our relationships, it's a place of mastery. It's like
Mhm.
it's not easy. I still get thrown off the boat on a regular basis, because
Totally.
there are
Yeah.
people close to me in
These
my
people
life.
are crazy, Jason. Yeah.
uh, yeah, everyone's crazy, right? When
Yeah.
they're triggered, everyone is not sane when they're triggered, and so
Yeah.
um, yeah, really learning to handle that and like work with the regulation of my own nervous system and others, and yeah, it's a path. It's a life path.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, I'm so glad that you wrote a bunch of it down. And and I think probably better than many have that way to then simplify and synthesize. Because even those, it's like we could say that it's always living and organic and growing. And then the truth is, when you take some of those practices and their simplicity, that they are things that we can come back to throughout our entire lives. It's not like, oh, I learned how to do this thing one time and now it's done. It's like I come back, 10 years later, or 5 months later, or a year later, and I'm like, oh, I see it differently, or oh, I can now practice this with a new person, or whoa, even this person I did it with, I did this exercise with a year ago, like now it's completely different. And so it's so valuable to have those things like actually codified, if you will.
Mm, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, and I'll go back to the original question, which is like, what's next for your work in the world? Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe the answer is like, I don't totally know. I'm looking over here because my calendar's over here. So there's a way that I'm like, what am I doing? I certainly, this is maybe more like of the moment. But I certainly hope to be in person with people more again.
Mhm.
I really do think that there's something so valuable and rich about like what we
Mhm.
can discover body to body.
Mhm.
Um, and it's hard for me. Maybe I'll just share like the struggle is that I really do believe that there is value in like groups of same. It could be like all women or all men or all mothers or all, like I think there's value in that. There's some place where there's enough resonance that then we can work with some of the other things. But I really want to work more with co-ed groups. Like I hold more all female spaces.
Mhm.
And another one of the reasons that I created Relationship by Design was actually like, oh, I really want to bring more men into this work, or, even in the realm of non-binary, or just like take it out of this man-woman dynamics conversation that often happens around relationship, and like dive into know the relationality of it. So I have some real hope, like, or dreams. I have some real dreams in that vein, and I don't know exactly how they're going to play out.
Mm, cool. Yeah, there's been so many different courses, like starting with Authentic Man program way back when that you've referenced. Um, and there's been many different uh, facilitator courses. A lot of them have been like, oh, here's how to facilitate this. Here's how to facilitate an authentic relating game night, or how to facilitate circling, or whatever it is. And then, you know, the newer kind of courses of like, okay, here's the full authentic relating tool set or skill sets. This is a whole communication 101, self-awareness 101 training, right? There's been that style of course. But there's actually a lot of new innovations happening. Like that's one of the reasons I'm doing this interview series, is because there's a lot of new things out there. Like me and one of my partners are really working on bringing it into business, and we've had to develop a different style course in a very different way, because a lot of the ways that have been used, a lot of the methods that have been used in the personal growth environment don't really translate very well to the business
Mhm.
environment. They end up being clunky or awkward. Um, so I just think that we're still in the beginning of something uh,
Yeah.
that I would call the human connection movement. Yeah.
I like human connection movement. I don't know if you know Simon Darcy,
Of
but
course.
he
Yeah.
would talk about being a culture creator.
Yeah.
And I really love that term also, and I
Mhm.
think these are like their tools for culture creation.
Yes.
Um, and one of the spaces that I hold is called the collective. So it's like an ongoing space rather than like a program that goes from A to B. Um, and I couldn't, there was sort of this idea, or people were asking for something like that. And I couldn't do it until actually had a vision of a spider web.
Oh, wow.
And then the tagline became a global web of women devoted to embodied wholeness. And so I
Mm.
think like these are all kind of these different ways, like the connection movement or culture creation, or like a global web of, right. And understanding it's actually already always there. Like it is a web. And then how can we touch in on it? Can we be connected to it? Can we feel the other people? Um, so that's the way that I would say I feel myself like working with that is
Mm.
really, creating community and culture in that way.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, it's been really great to be with you during this
Like,
whole dialogue, and we'll include some links where people can learn about the collective and relationship by design. And thank you so much for doing this with me, Kendra.
you're so welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
All right, take care.